Hello and welcome to Americans Talk Australian Survivor. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
Just the two of us today. We just watched episode 24, the finale of Australian Survivor Titans vs. Rebels, and there will be spoilers ahead. Thank you to everyone voted on the poll last night. We asked who you thought would win out of the final three, and the vast majority said Ferris, then second place was Mark, and then third was Caroline. So let's see if our viewers were correct.
Yeah, those seem like good votes.
Yeah, so we open up on the finale on day 46.
That is a long time to be out there eating rice and living next to a fire.
Yeah, quite a while. Ferris says that he's sad, he's feeling numb. He thinks he has to win this immunity challenge today or he goes home.
He said he lost everything and he thinks he's fallen short.
Yeah, he's really feeling down on himself, and we've seen him feel this way for a couple of days now since Kirby went home.
Well, I think he's right. If he loses, he's out.
Yeah, I don't see Mark or Caroline taking him to the end.
Right.
Meanwhile, Mark, on the other hand, is having a great day. He says that dreams really do come true.
Yeah, I'll destroy anyone. He's on fire, you know.
Yeah, he says diplomacy is over and it's just war.
Yep.
So Mark is ready to go. He's excited for the challenge and he's planning to win it.
And Caroline, too.
Yeah, Caroline mentions that she's been playing the long game and that no one expected her to be here this long and she's ready to go. So interestingly, we only see sound bites from the final three going into the immunity challenge, and then we're just already at the challenge.
Right. Minutes into the show, and we're already at the challenge.
Which I guess there's really no more strategy to talk back at camp. Typically, we'll see a couple minutes at least, kind of.
Who we going to vote off tonight, and setting up some drama, but it's just the three of them. So the main focus of the beginning of the show was definitely this challenge.
Yeah. So we get into it. So before they get started, Jonathan brings out a family member for each player. And we see Mark's wife come out, Caroline's husband, and Ferris's wife all join them. And we get to hear a little bit about their relationships. And they're all very proud, of course, of their spouses for making it to the final three.
It must have been very cool to come out and be able to see, your husband or your wife right there after getting all that way, knowing that they made it all the way to the final. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome to be able to celebrate with them out in Samoa and watch them at that point. We were wondering about Raymond's family, if they were out there, if they were still back in Australia. How do you fly someone out like the day before the vote or the day after a vote? So if anyone so Raymond, if you're listening, let us know. Was your family in Samoa?
Right. Well, I feel like they must have been, so that, because the very next day they needed somebody.
Yeah.
So I feel like his family must have been there.
So the family gets to have a seat on the bench, and the players are put on a wheel. So they have to grab at two poles and stand on really pointy poles on this giant wheel in the middle of a ton of flames. It's really hot. And at different intervals, Jonathan moves the wheel so that the points get more narrow on the feet, and then eventually you only have 1 foot to stand on.
Right, and they didn't do the first rotation until after an hour, or maybe it was the second rotation, but it seemed like they stood there for a long time on those, and it seems like they could have made the challenge faster if they just would have gotten to the hardest peg last.
Yeah. Although it was a fairly fast challenge. I mean, we've heard about 6-hour challenges, people going, hours and hours on end. And it was only, I think, all in all, it was about 2.5 hours. So
right.
I guess they were trying to speed it up a little bit. And they don't want the family sitting there for 6 hours just staring.
Right. But it did look very difficult trying to hold yourself up with your arms to take the pressure off your foot that's on that peg, and no comfortable spot on the bottom of your foot.
Yeah, and especially with the heat, you would think that you'd get slippery and sweaty and you might just fall off.
Right.
But everyone does a really great job. Everyone's looking uncomfortable, but the sun sets, it's getting dark, we're making turns, and eventually, at 2 hours in, Mark eventually gives up and he drops out of the challenge. 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Right.
And right before he had dropped off, He had been saying that he's in a lot of pain, and Caroline kind of nodded to him, I think, to say, like, I've got this and I'll take you.
Right. And then it was Ferris and Caroline standing there, and neither of them were going to give up.
Yeah, Caroline said she was locked and loaded, and they were ready to go. Meanwhile, Mark is on the bench with his wife, and he says that he thinks that he can beat both of them, so it really doesn't matter that he dropped out of the challenge. So, very confident, and he's
Yes.
sharing it right next to their loved ones.
Right. Caroline slips but recovers. A little dramatic there with her feet on the pegs.
Yeah, she's like holding on just by her hands and is able to recover. So everyone's struggling. We're on one peg, and eventually Caroline drops out after, was it 2.5 hours?
It was, 2.5 hours standing there on those pegs. That must have hurt a lot on the feet.
And yeah, it looked very, very difficult.
But Ferris wins the immunity challenge, and he gets to decide who goes with him to the final two.
Very exciting. Huge win for Ferris. So congratulations, Ferris, on his very first immunity win. This was the most important individual immunity, and he got it when it counted.
If you're going to win one, this is the one to win.
Yeah.
So congratulations to him for doing it.
Amazing job. And it looked like he could have gone longer. He was
Right.
probably gearing up for 6 hours like the usual.
He didn't look like he was struggling at all.
Yeah, he looked uncomfortable, but not like he was about to drop out.
Right.
So he was narrowed in and ready to go. So then, interestingly, we go straight to tribal council. There's no time back at camp to discuss or for Caroline and Mark to kind of plead their case to Ferris.
Although it seemed like Mark was about to plead his case. Like we had like a soundbite from him saying, I'm going to talk to Ferris and tell him why he should pick me. But he never did.
Yeah, maybe he thought they were going back to camp.
Right. It was just oddly placed
Yeah.
in the how the show was put together.
I guess he took his opportunity at tribal council.
Right. Maybe that's what he meant. That's what he'll just do it publicly.
Yeah. So we head into tribal council and we bring in the jury, and Raymond, the most recent person voted off, is coming in and he's trying to peer around everyone, and he has his fingers crossed, and he sees that Ferris has the immunity necklace and he starts cheering.
Yes.
So definitely,
Kind of unusual. Usually we don't hear anything from the jury and he's cheering already.
yeah, the most exciting entrance from a jury member we've seen this season. So he's very excited. Looks very similar to how he did on the game tonight. But
Right.
he is really happy to see his friend Ferris doing well. And it seems like Mark and Caroline sitting next to Ferris are kind of buttering him up. Mark is saying, well, I'm really proud of you. Caroline's like giving him a little hug. It feels like they're trying to get in his good graces before he makes this vote.
Right. So Caroline says she's going to be able to hold her own. And Mark says, watch out. Caroline is really clever. So in other words, take me, Mark. Don't take Caroline. She's going to be a difficult person to beat.
Yeah, it was interesting that Mark really went after Caroline and said, this is why you have to take me, because you can't sit next to Caroline, which I think you have to get a little bit on the offense in that sense and sort of attack the other person to get make sure that you're not sitting on the jury. Caroline, though, takes a different approach and just says, oh, well, I deserve to be there, and, I hope we can compete. So I think it's interesting because you do have to sell yourself, but at the same time, you want to minimize your threat level to the person who's about to take you. So it's very weird. It's like you can't oversell yourself because then you're showing that you're great at manipulating the jury and doing your speech and all of that, but that
Too confident, yeah.
very difficult situation to maneuver. And there's really not a lot of discussion. We basically go right to the vote. So as Ferris is up at the voting poll, Caroline says, I think it's going to be me. And
Meaning she's going to be voted out.
yeah, she thought she was going over to the jury.
And Mark agreed. Mark thought, or not agreed, disagreed and thought he was going to be sent to the jury.
Yeah.
So they both thought that they both were going to get voted out. And then they read the vote.
And it was Mark.
Right.
So-
Mark got sent to the jury.
Mark is the final member of the jury, and Caroline and Ferris are the final two. So congratulations to Caroline. Her
Right.
social game worked out that she was brought to the final two, and that's what matters. Like we've been saying all week, you have to sit at the final two to be able to plead your case, and she and Ferris got there. So congratulations.
I remember when the season started, I never thought that this woman, Caroline, would be at the end,
Yeah.
let alone one of the final two at the end. Like, wow, that is very impressive, because it seems that so often the oldest members, like we've talked about this before, get voted off
Yeah.
quickly.
Very early.
Right. They'll say that they're not strong enough or they're too tired or something, and then they vote them off. They're not doing enough, and then they get rid of them. But she stuck on. She did. That's not the case with her, but she was strong, and she didn't seem to give up.
Yeah. And she was very strategic as well. It was also kind of funny to think back that there were complaints about her monitoring the rice intake and making people do chores.
Yes.
And I guess it worked out in her favor because she didn't go home because of it.
Right.
It seems like we always expect if there's like any complaint about camp life, that person's typically going home pretty soon. But not
Sure.
Caroline, she pulled it off.
Right.
So congratulations to the final two.
There never did seem to be much issue with the rice, other than that one or two times when they mentioned it like that. But they never thought that they were going to run out, and they never had to fight for their rice or give up their rice, like
Yeah.
you've seen in other series.
Yeah, I'm glad that it's not a big issue because I feel like
They should be given something to eat.
yeah, rice is enough to sustain, or enough
Right.
to sustain you should be kind of at minimum. And then I think it makes the rewards a little bit more fun that it's something different than rice, and you're not just trying to earn your rice back.
Right. And you're not absolutely starving because you haven't eaten anything in 48 hours because all your rice is gone. It's just not fair.
Yeah. So the final two wake up on day 47, and they have made it as far as they can in this game. Ferris is worried, though. He said that maybe Mark is going to turn the jury against him. Although I kind of thought, why would Mark do that? He's, maybe he's disappointed that Ferris didn't take him. But at this point, the game for Mark is over. He doesn't have anything to gain by turning the jury against Ferris.
That's true. I guess that's true for just about everybody in the jury. I mean, you're mad that you got voted off, but it doesn't seem like generally the jury carries that big of a grudge. It kind of goes away, and they just take the person who played the best game.
Yeah.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
Although
sometimes
they look so angry sitting there. Maybe they're just bored, but they sit there with, emotionless or frowns.
I think production must tell them that they have to have like a very neutral to angry expression. There's no way that everyone just has the exact same identical angry expression on
Yeah.
their face during
Seems unlikely.
tribal.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure that Mark is really manipulating the jury, but Ferris is getting anxious. Meanwhile, Caroline mentions that we have one Titan and one Rebel left at the final two.
That is really cool.
Very fitting. And we've been saying all season how it's very interesting that the alliances are mixing, and it's never been straight Titans versus Rebels for more than about a vote. So it's fitting that it is one-on-one, and it's also very exciting. We really get to see that the Rebels and Titans were not so different after all.
Right.
They were both able to make it to the end.
It's interesting when you watch Survivor and you think, oh, those two are never going to get along because they're from different tribes. And then here, in this case, they did get along,
Yeah.
right? I mean, usually you think, oh, they're just going to stick with their friends that they were with in the beginning of the show and get rid of all the outsiders. And that, like you were just saying, it was going back and forth the whole time, mixing and matching all the time.
Yeah. It seemed like it was mostly because more born out of like anger towards their tribe. They wanted to get someone within their own tribe out, and that's kind of why they would
Right.
switch alliances. However, I do think it also speaks to just the nature of these players, that they're all willing to play the game truly how it's meant to be instead of just sticking to their original tribal alliances. They're willing to be creative in the game and switch votes when you need to and be a little bit more flexible.
Right. Like Leah mentioned in the last episode, the people who picked the contestants on this episode did a fantastic job. They picked really great people.
Yeah.
And so they were willing to not stick with their original tribe and to mix. So that they were great players.
And it made for a fantastic season.
Right. So day 47, they have their Survivor breakfast, which is fantastic. It looked great.
Yeah.
Orange juice, and they were making eggs or an omelet or something, and then they got to eat it on the beach.
Yeah.
That looked very nice.
Very nice pastries. And then they found a scroll, and I'm thinking, oh, that must be a clue. You've got to hide it. But no, it's day 47, so it was not a clue. It's just a congratulatory message. But I wonder if it's difficult, especially on like the last day and the first couple days, to turn off that part of your brain that's thinking you always have to go a step ahead.
Right.
Because if I'm just a viewer and I'm having trouble remembering that we're not looking for idols anymore, I can't imagine what it's like after living out there for 47 days in the game.
Right. Looking around each corner, what do I see? What can I get?
Yeah.
How can I get ahead?
So they're both looking forward to getting into the final tribal. Caroline sort of brings up the point that it's very similar to giving birth, that she's crowning and she's getting so ready to kind of make the final push and win the game. So an interesting analogy. Remind me a little bit about Kelly sharing her birth story on the on her son's birthday to the tribe.
Oh, right. Yep.
A little oversharing on a birth analogy, but
When they all sang.
yeah, but Caroline's right. She is so close to finishing out the game.
Right. And she feels like she has a target on her back, she said.
Which is interesting because you really don't think about a target at the final two because there's no votes left.
Right.
So
Well, you don't want the target on your back so that they go for somebody else. I think what she means is like a blemish.
oh, okay. Yeah.
That's what I think that she means.
Well, then we go to the final tribal. So all of the jury is there, and everyone's looking excited to be at the final tribal. Raymond has cut his hair this time.
Yes,
So
he does look completely different.
He was busy during that last day on day 47.
And Mark cut his hair too.
Yeah, everyone looked good. So Caroline goes first and gives her pitch to the jury. She talks about the middle-aged mafia, about Viola and Valeria, and as she's talking about these two, Valeria looks like surprised, like, oh, you brought me up. And she talks about, the Viola vote and kind of her path throughout the game. She's very linear in that discussion, which I think is good. She made sure that she hit all the big points and reminded everyone of her strengths.
I think she did a nice job. I think that's what you have to do. Don't forget, I did this and I was in this group and we did this together.
Yeah, because you're sitting there on the final two saying, well, of course you remember I did this big move, 30 days ago, but if it's someone else, you're not thinking about it as much, so you have to just remind them and throw it in everyone's face. I made big moves and I deserve to win.
Right. Not everybody in the jury can remember, so you got to bring it up.
Yeah. And some of them weren't there. She talked a lot about the pre-merge game, and not everyone saw that, so very important to bring up. Ferris then goes and gives his pitch. He talks about his Misfits alliance. He talks about how Alex's speech sort of kicked him into gear to take out Kirby. So who would have guessed that Alex going home would have had such a huge impact on every single episode after the game, or after he left, and such an impact on how the game turned out.
Right. I don't recall ever seeing that in Survivor before, that somebody stands up and says something as they're being voted out, as they're being, their torch is being snuffed, and then they make a statement that has such a ripple effect that keeps on going.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool for Alex.
Yeah, so good for Alex. He really made his mark on this game. So then it's time for the jury to have their turn to ask some questions. Mark goes first, and he wants to know about when Caroline was most in danger. She brings up the Viola vote. I thought that was interesting because we know as viewers that Mark and Viola had talked about getting out Caroline, but if you recall, Mark had said to Caroline, or to Viola, it's not time yet, let's go with the group vote. So I thought it was interesting that Mark posed this question and didn't correct Caroline, like, oh, well, actually, you weren't in danger. I guess he was being nice by not, embarrassing her, I guess. But it would have been interesting just to see
a confrontation.
Yeah, a little bit more discussion about that. Since her answer was kind of about Mark.
Right.
More or less. Then Aileen goes next. She asks Ferris about why he didn't listen to her. So she seems to have also been listening to the podcast. We've been saying that too. He didn't play his idol for Garrick. He played his idol when he didn't need to. So Aileen wants to talk a little bit about what his big individual moves are.
Right. And is that when he brought up
Alex's idol.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was interesting because we know as viewers that Ferris found the idol and he kept it hidden until Alex found it because he wanted Alex to have possession of the idol.
That's right.
But I don't think he explained that. He just kind of said, well, I gave Alex an idol. But I don't know. I felt like he was lacking a little bit in that answer.
Right. Did everybody know the backstory there? Or should he have just said it to remind everybody? I found it. I knew where it was. I just didn't want it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I was getting worried for Ferris at this point. I'm thinking, I don't know if he's answering these questions correctly.
Right. It seemed like Caroline was doing a better job.
Yes.
Winning over people.
Yeah.
Being like a mother figure, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's very eloquent in her speech, and she's able to show a lot of compassion through her speaking. And I feel like she seemed to be very connected to the jury as she was talking.
She seems to answer every question by repeating the question that was given to her.
Yeah.
It's great. You know, you'd think that she might be an English teacher or a grammar teacher or something, but she did a great job.
Very good at public speaking.
Yes.
Rihanna was not as happy with Caroline as we were at this point. She lays into her for lying to her, saying, you said you were loyal to your alliance, but you gave me fake names. And she seems pretty annoyed with Caroline. She has not gotten over that Caroline turned against her.
Right. And she's sitting there with a frown on her face like everybody.
Like everyone else, yeah. So I don't know. I thought that it was a fair question, but I would say my advice to Rihanna would be that it's just a game, and the game is to lie to people.
Right.
So I agree that she should be upset that Caroline lied to her twice in the game. But now we're at the jury, and you have to see, well, that was actually a good move because she got Rihanna to trust her twice, and she didn't even need her vote.
Right. She outwitted her.
Yeah.
Which is part of the game. It doesn't say you can't lie.
Yeah.
Right? The rules don't say no lying.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't make it to the end without at least a little bit of lying, especially this season. You had to.
Right.
Val then gets into the mix, and she says that she has no idea who she's going to vote for. She doesn't think that any of the rest of the jury knows who they're going to vote for because they're not seeing enough emotion and truth from the final two.
I thought that was odd, her saying that and asking everybody that. I'm sure they must talk about that when they're at the Ponderosa.
Who you're going to vote for?
Right.
Have you made up your mind?
Yeah. I mean, what else could they possibly be talking about all day long while they're sitting there getting ready?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe just...
It's just surprising that she would say that. And then she asked everyone else. I was surprised.
Yeah, she was kind of taking over the hosting duties.
Mm-hmm.
She's after JLP's job. He better watch out.
Yes.
She did have a very interesting question, though. She asked, how many votes do you think that you'll get? And neither of the players wanted to answer.
Right. Like a true politician.
Yeah, I think you can't say for sure. Yeah, there's no good answer to that question. But I thought it was interesting. We haven't heard that one before, and it was a good question.
Right. If I had been her and I had asked that, and then they both, sort of gave a roundabout, I'll be happy to get anything or whatever, I'd say, but a number. Do you think you'll get 5?
Just real
4
for an exact number.
Just to see what they're thinking. I don't know. If you're going to ask that question, you might as well make them squirm a little bit.
Yeah, get the answer at the end of it. Yeah, so interesting. I guess if someone would have said, I'm expecting to get every single vote, then you would say, that's a little too confident.
Right. Big head.
Yeah, so I see how that could have affected the vote, but I think both of the players handled it well.
Yes.
Alex is then coming back for Caroline. He really went after Caroline on the tribal council where he went home. He said, Caroline, what have you done since the merge? You haven't done anything this whole game. And again, he says, Caroline, what have you done since I left? Which I thought was interesting that he's so worried about Caroline's game.
Yes.
He's very preoccupied with it, which, I mean, it is the final tribal. Of course, he should be. But
and then she describes her big move when she had... Right, is that when she describes that she was going to vote for Ferris and not tell anyone else and then play the idol for Mark?
Yeah, which was a big move. And we had said on the podcast that would have been huge if she had.
Had that worked, it would have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because Ferris wouldn't be there right now. Mark would be there.
Yeah.
And
the whole game would have changed.
Right. She plays the idol for Mark. Mark gets 1 vote. Ferris gets 1 vote. And it didn't work.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't come through. But I think it was a good answer. It was an honest answer. She tried to make a big move, and Raymond said so your move was playing Hannah wrong. And she didn't really get to respond to that, which I thought was kind of not fair.
I thought it was a good comeback from
Raymond.
From Raymond, yes.
Yeah, Raymond is definitely Team Ferris. He's like cheering him on. He's the only one showing any emotion all of Tribal. And then finally we get to Kirby. We have been waiting to hear what Kirby had to say this entire time. And she said, so Ferris, you said you weren't scared to sit next to me at the end, but you're not sitting next to me.
You got rid of me.
So were you scared? It's a great question.
Yes,
I think
we're all wondering.
We've all been thinking, yeah, he must have been scared if he didn't want to sit next to Kirby. And I think it was probably the right move. He would have had a very difficult time beating Kirby. It would have been a close call. And he's looking better without her next to him.
Right. Yeah, I think most of us can agree that Kirby would have won if she had been there. If she were one of the final two, she would have been the winner.
Yeah.
Right. So he said, I just feel like I had a better chance without you.
Which is fair. Yeah. I mean,
that's true. It's right. It's part of playing the game. You know, you can't tell your friend when you're going to vote them out.
Yeah.
So he did it, or it would have been him somewhere down the line, even though she said she wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
It's hard.
She may have. Yeah.
Right.
So, I don't know. I thought that was a good question. And then Ferris sort of comes into himself a little bit here. He talks about all of the big things that he's done with Raymond and the fake idol. He talks about being a representation for his religion, for his ethnicity, and for his parents, how he's going to make them proud with this. And he really has a great kind of finale wrap-up speech.
It'll be life-changing.
Yeah.
$500,000.
And I think, I don't know if Kirby set him up for this necessarily, or if he just took this opportunity to say what he wanted to say.
And ran with it.
Yeah, but he really sold himself here, I think. And it's too bad that Caroline didn't really get a chance kind of to respond necessarily.
I felt that was a huge turning point in the game.
Yeah.
Or at least in this episode, right? Like, it didn't seem, it was going back and forth, and then he answered this question, and it was like, oh, that was the answer to push him over.
We were thinking, okay, he's won the game now.
Right.
So it's too bad that we didn't see that moment from Caroline. That would have been cool. I think
she didn't have a convincing moment like that.
Yeah, which I think it's hard for her because the money may not be as life-changing for her as it would be for Ferris. And, you know, she's not the first person of her ethnicity to win the title of Sole Survivor. So it is a little bit hard to have that big punch at the end.
Right.
But they both did a fantastic job at the final Tribal. They both came in prepared. They had really great answers. They were very honest, and they didn't stumble. So
right. They thought it through. They spoke well.
Yeah. So great job to Ferris and Caroline. They did fantastic. It's time to vote, and we bring in the spouses again to read out the final votes.
Oh, the Mark spouse didn't get to come in.
Well, yeah, just for Ferris and Caroline. So it turns out that every single vote is for Ferris. So congratulations on Ferris. He had a clean sweep of the votes.
I feel bad for Caroline. I always feel bad for the person who doesn't get any votes or only gets one vote.
Yeah.
But I understand that they all felt that Ferris played the best game and that he should be the winner.
And we do tend to see that often. So I think going back to what you were saying, do they talk about this at the jury villa? I think they do, because it does seem to be unanimous or almost unanimous more often than not. So there must be some discussion of, oh, you're right. Actually, I think maybe Ferris was a better player.
Yeah.
Or
okay.
they say, what do you want to hear at the final Tribal?
And if I hear this, then I'm going to vote for him. But if I hear this, I'll vote for her. Yeah. So congratulations to Ferris. That's very cool. Way to go.
Fantastic. He played a great game all season.
He did.
And he pulled it off.
Right.
I was surprised that Kitty didn't vote for Caroline since they had been so close since day one. But at the confessional, I guess Kitty said that it would be life-changing for Ferris. So maybe she was thinking more about the money than the title of Sole Survivor.
Right. Which seems a little odd to me, but I don't know. I mean, is the game to reward the person who needs it the most?
Yeah.
Or who plays the game the best?
I think that's always a tough decision at the final Tribal, because you have people who will go in and they'll pitch, I lost my job and I support, every member of my family and I don't have a house. And then you're like, oh man, you need the $1 million or the $500,000 versus someone who It's a
Right. Or
millionaire.
right. Or the lawyer or the professional.
Yeah.
You know.
So I think it's going to have some impact at the end of the day when you're writing down a name for $1 million or $500,000. You're going to think about who needs the money. But you're right, it shouldn't have an impact on who wins the title of Sole Survivor. And you have to remember that those go together and represent the whole season.
Right. So we've seen it before, and I'm sure we'll see it in future episodes where people lie about their background or just aren't necessarily forthcoming about what they do, what their lifestyle is like, so that it doesn't come down to something like this.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want people to know blank about me.
Yeah.
And I understand.
A former NBA player and have
Right,
millions of dollars. Or
Yes,
whatever.
right.
But at the end of the day, Ferris won. So congratulations, Ferris.
Very cool.
Fantastic game all season. He played idols. He faked idols. He didn't even talk about Raymond's big move. He didn't even take credit for that. And he guessed he didn't need to. It was
Right.
that big of a move. That he could do it in secret and still win the game.
Right. Yeah, on yesterday's episode, we thought for sure that he was going to bring that up if he won.
Yeah.
And that was like a selling point of his, that he knew when he told him what to do and how to do it.
He should have, because
Right.
that was a big move. That was a big,
He could have gotten an Oscar for directing.
yeah. So congratulations to Ferris and all of the players this season. It was an incredible season. We loved watching it, and thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate everyone for listening this season, and of course, for the players who are playing.
Right. And if you have a comment or want to keep in touch with us, please send us an email.
At ataustraliansurvivor@gmail.com. And we'll still be on Instagram posting the polls at ATA Survivor and on TikTok at ATA Survivor.
And when the next season comes out, we'll be there.
See you next season.